Today's lesson is A Little Look at Greenland, the world's largest island. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I am Roger, and today we're traveling to Greenland, which, of course, is an island in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's east of Canada and west of Iceland there. And, of course, people don't usually think about Greenland too much, but it has made the news recently because Donald Trump has threatened to buy it, or at least wants to buy it. But I think the Danes aren't interested in selling it.
No, I don't think they are interested in selling it. There doesn't really seem to be a reason. I think there are many American military workers there, military service people on Greenland. It's, of course, an important place if you're monitoring the North Atlantic, and a lot of submarine activity from Russia comes around that area. And more, as the world gets warmer, I think a lot of people are looking at the polar regions as new areas that will be open to exploitation. And obviously, generally with Donald Trump, there's something involving money involved there, and it's probably, yes, about oil deposits and other mining opportunities that could exist back there. But as you said, Greenland is owned or at least controlled by Denmark, and Denmark is kind of not really keen on this idea. But Donald Trump, his way to creating issues for people. So we're going to look at Greenland, not so much about the politics and the news about it, but the actual place, because it is an interesting place. It is the largest island in the world, and a lot of people don't know much about it. I can't think of anyone I know who's ever been to Greenland. It's not a huge holiday resort destination, but it is a very interesting place with a very interesting history. So let's find out all about Greenland in the article today and tomorrow. But we're going to kick it off with just a few basics. Very beginning of the article. Let's read it or listen to it now. A little look at Greenland, the world's largest island. In recent months, Greenland has been thrust onto the world stage due to remarks made by U.S. President Donald Trump. With the spotlight on the world's largest island, now is the perfect time to learn more about it.
大家好，第一部分介绍动词 thrust， 它的意思是用力推、推挤、刺或是猛塞。例如 Charlotte was thrust into the spotlight at a young age. Charlotte 年纪轻轻就被推向公众焦点。或者 Alan thrust me roughly through the open door. Alan 粗暴地把我推进了敞开的门。后面看到名词 remark， 它的意思是言论或是评论。例如 I thought the boy's remarks were rude, so I told him to apologize to me. 我觉得那个男孩的言论很粗暴，所以我叫他向我道歉。再看一个例子 Once Jez has concluded his presentation, we'll all offer our remarks. 在 Jez 结束他的报告后，我们都将发表我们的评论。再来看到名词 spotlight， 表示关注焦点或是聚光灯。例如 The singer enjoyed being in the spotlight during the award ceremony. 这位歌手在颁奖典礼上享受了聚光灯下的时刻。或是 The actor is standing in the spotlight. 那名演员站在聚光灯下。
Okay, let's talk about the first paragraph here. It's not quite so long, so we'll be done talking about it soon enough. It says, in recent months, Greenland has been thrust onto the world stage due to remarks made by U.S. President Donald Trump. Okay, so here we've got the verb to thrust, which means to move something forward rather quickly. You might thrust somebody by pushing them, or if you murder somebody, you might thrust a knife into them. You don't want to do that, but that's just an example of the usage of this word. And yes, indeed, it has become news quite quickly and quite suddenly because of what Donnie said here. We got remarks made by Donald Trump. A remark is just something that somebody says. It's a comment by somebody. And yes, he has said that the U.S. should buy Greenland from Denmark.
Very, very interesting. With the spotlight on the world's largest island, now is the perfect time to learn more about it. So yes, the spotlight is on the world's largest island, Greenland, with the spotlight on it. That means a lot of attention is being paid to it. It could be an actual literal spotlight like we have in a theater, that light that follows the main performer as they walk around. That's the spotlight. But when you're in the spotlight, when we use this in a more general way, we're not talking about necessarily being on on stage, we're talking about having a lot of attention on you. So during Oscar season, the spotlight is on Hollywood and some of the top films and actors and actresses from the last year. So attention is on them. A lot of the media is writing and talking about it. People will be watching it on TV. And then a few months later, the spotlight might be on the Olympics because maybe the Olympics are starting that month. So the spotlight is on the city and the athletes. And it's just basically talking about public attention. And it's on the world's largest island. It is Greenland. A lot of people might say it's Australia, but I think Australia qualifies as a continent and not technically an island. But generally, Greenland is credited as being the world's largest island. So now is the perfect or the best time or a great opportunity to learn more about it. So let's learn more about it, starting off with some basic statistics in our next paragraph. Home to around 57,000 people and covering over 2 million square kilometers, Greenland lies 26 kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean from its nearest neighbor, Canada. Most of its land sits within the Arctic Circle and is covered by ice year-round, while the rest is tundra, a flat, treeless landscape where little survives.
第二部分看到名词 landscape， 它的意思是地貌或是路上的风景。例如 The many flowers made the landscape colorful. 许多花朵让风景变得色彩缤纷。也可以说 The landscape in the countryside around here is quite beautiful. 这附近乡村的风景相当美丽。
Okay, here in the next paragraph it says, home to around 57,000 people and covering over 2 million square kilometers, Greenland lies 26 kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean from its nearest neighbor, Canada. So this gives us some basic information about Greenland. Not a lot of people live in Greenland, considering how big it is. It does not have a very high population density, and it only has 57,000 people. So yes, indeed, it's not very big, but it's still quite large. It covers over 2 million square kilometers, so you can go quite a long time crossing Greenland and never see another person. And it lies 26 kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean from its nearest neighbor, Canada. So if you're in Canada, I suppose if you're up in Labrador or something like that, hundreds of islands there in northern Canada. I can't name them all, but yeah, it's pretty close to that island there. It's only 26 kilometers away, and that, of course, puts it in the Atlantic Ocean. That's the ocean that's between the Americas and Europe and Africa. That's the Atlantic Ocean. And, of course, Canada is the nearest neighbor, I guess, to Greenland. I guess Iceland is in the other direction, but it's farther away.
That's right. But generally, if you're flying to Greenland, you're probably flying from a more southern location, so it wouldn't be just a quick flight of 26 kilometers. It would probably be much further. But it is very close to Canada in the very far north, where, of course, the ocean water is covered with ice most of the year, at least for now. But it says most of the land sits within the Arctic Circle, so it's very, very far north. We're thinking about around the North Pole, where what do we have? Polar bears, some seals, not much else. And it's very hard, or if not impossible, for people to live up there because the land there is covered by ice year-round. So you can't grow anything. You can't see grass. You're walking on ice in June and July as you're walking on ice in December and January. It's covered in ice year-round, all the year round for 12 months of the year, all year long, while the rest, the more southern part of Greenland, is tundra, a flat, treeless landscape where little survives. Much of northern Canada is also tundra, or tundra, as some people might say. It's very flat. It has no trees because most of the ground, at least just slightly below the surface, is frozen year-round. I believe that's called permafrost. So growing things or even digging a hole to build a house or something is very, very hard because, of course, the ground is very hard. The ground is icy and rocky and doesn't support a lot of life. So it's a flat, treeless landscape. When we talk about the landscape, that's the land, the shape of the land. If you're standing on a mountain, you get a great view of the landscape. If you're a farmer, you might be looking at the shape of the landscape, where it rolls and folds and rises and things like that. Or even a golfer, right? When a golfer is trying to putt the ball, they might crouch down to have a look at the landscape, the kind of shape of the land, and the features of the land as well. well. But basically, the land itself is flat, it's treeless, and little survives there, both animal and plant. So obviously, human settlements and agriculture, growing food, it's an impossibility in this part of the world, which explains why, being the largest island in the world, there's only 57,000 people there, and I bet most of them, if not all of them, live along the coastline.
Probably, and yes, indeed, you might think, well, if it's flat and treeless, who would want to go there? But there's something to be said about flat places because they actually make the sky bigger, so you might see some pretty fantastic sunsets there if you happen to go there, and you might run into some native people as well. I think I also like their flag, too. It's pretty cool. Okay, that brings us to the second part of our lesson for today. Let's go on to the third part and listen first.
The question of the island's sovereignty is a complex one. It has been claimed by several different groups throughout history, but since 2009, it has been a self-governing territory of Denmark. The U.S. has set its sights on buying the island from Denmark at least half a dozen times. The earliest notable example was in 1867, and the most recent occurred just this year after Trump claimed that owning Greenland was an absolute necessity. Greenland's location between North America and Europe makes it valuable from a military perspective. Moreover, the island has vast reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, and natural gas. And as Arctic ice melts due to global warming, these resources are becoming increasingly accessible.
第三部分介绍形容词 notable 表示著名的或是值得注意的、显著的，可以说The flagship store is the most notable retail location in the city. 这间旗舰店是城里最著名的商业据点。又或者说 New York is the site of several notable museums. 纽约有一些著名的博物馆。继续介绍名词 perspective 指的是角度或是观点。举例来说 Everyone has their own perspective on what success means. 每个人对成功的意义都有自己的看法。或是From my perspective, changing our strategy now would be unwise. 依我的观点看来，现在更换策略并不明智。下一个看到名词 mineral 表示矿物或是矿物质。例如 The mountains are rich in minerals that have attracted various mining companies. 这些山脉富含矿物资源，吸引了许多矿业公司。也可以说 These mountains are rich in iron, copper, and other valuable minerals. 这座山脉富含铁、铜还有其他珍贵的矿物质。
Okay, so again, we're talking about Greenland in today's program, and now we're going to talk about the island's sovereignty. The question of the island's sovereignty is a complex one. Okay, sovereignty just refers to the power that a country has in a certain area. If we say that a country is ruled by another country, we say that that country has sovereignty over that place. And of course, there are some places that are disputed in the world, like the Diaoyutai here close to Taiwan. The sovereignty is very controversial. Should it be controlled by the Japanese, by Taiwan, by China, or whatever? So yes, it's a very sensitive issue. That's sovereignty or political control of a certain area.
Yeah, so apparently the sovereignty of Greenland is a complex one. It's a bit complicated. When you have these remote islands that no one really needs or has wanted in history, it often becomes a bit of a question, right? Sovereignty can be decided through negotiation, as Britain sort of negotiated the sovereignty of Hong Kong with the Chinese back in the 1990s, or it can be an area of conflict. I mean, the sovereignty of Taiwan is an area of conflict. Earlier in the 1980s, the Falkland Islands War was fought over the sovereignty of those little islands down there in the South Atlantic, part of Britain, but very close to Argentina. Who controls them? Well, no one has really cared for a long time, so when people start caring, it can become a bit of a political hot potato, a bit of a political issue. It says it has been claimed by several different groups throughout history, but since 2009, it has been a self-governing territory of Denmark. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting that Canada is not included in this conversation, since it is very much closer to Canada than any other country, but I don't think Canada has ever claimed Greenland. We have enough frozen tundra. We don't really need more in Canada.
Yeah, you guys can have it.
Yeah, we don't really mind too much because we got a lot of other frozen stuff and polar bears. We don't need more. But it has been claimed by different groups. groups, different groups through history, going back to, the Vikings, I think, were the first people to settle it. They gave it the name Greenland to try to get settlers to come over and live there. But since 2009, much more recently than the Vikings, it has been a self-governing territory of Denmark. So it's basically part of Denmark, but it has its own government. It runs its own affairs. I think Puerto Rico is a self-governing territory of America, right? They have their own laws. They have their own political elections and things like that. But ultimately, and certainly when it comes to national defense and stuff like that, or passports, they might have an American passport in the same way. Greenland has its own government. It has its own elected legislature, its own elected parliament or government, but they are part of Denmark. Denmark is there as the sort of parent country for this independent child that is Greenland. Self-governing means we make our own decisions for ourselves. It's not the president or the prime minister or the politicians in Denmark and Copenhagen who set our taxes and decide on our educational policies. It's us here in Greenland.
Okay, and the U.S., or the United States, has set its sights on buying the island from Denmark at least half a dozen times. So maybe Donald didn't have this idea originally. Maybe other presidents have had this idea in the past. If you set your sights on something, that is your goal. So the U.S. has wanted to buy the island from Denmark, and they expressed their intent to buy the island from Denmark many times in the past, but I guess Denmark turns them down every time. They don't want to give it up because I guess the Danes have a pretty good market of selling Danish cheese or Danish pastries to the people in Greenland. They don't want to lose that market.
Danish butter is very good. I will admit that. Yes, okay. It says the earliest notable example was in 1867. Wow, so this kind of story goes back a long way. This is the first notable example. There were maybe other sort of casual, half-hearted efforts by the U.S. to acquire Greenland before 1867, but this might have been the first official one where contracts or treaties or things like that were drawn up. If something's notable, it's worth paying attention to. It's important. It's not minor. It's not like, oh yeah, but that didn't really count. It's like, no, this was a real official effort to try to get Greenland, the first one that historians might really pay attention to. And that was back in 1867. Interesting, that's the year Canada became independent from Britain. So I wonder if there was a reason for the timing of that. But anyways, so that was back in 1867. And the most recent occurred just this year in 2025 after Trump claimed that owning Greenland was an absolute necessity. It was absolutely necessary for America to own Greenland. He never really explained why, but Trump doesn't usually explain why. He just says things. And Greenland's location, it is true, between North America and Europe, makes it valuable from a military perspective. Yes, the North Atlantic is a very important area. It's where the Russians and Russian submarines will be operating, as well as American submarines, a valuable place for spying and espionage and things like that. So from a military perspective, or from a military point of view, looking at it from the side of the generals and the admirals and the people whose job it is to fight wars and defend the country, it is valuable territory because it is an island in an area where there's a lot of naval activity. But as I said, I think the U.S. has several thousand military personnel located there, and Denmark has always allowed the U.S. and NATO, its other allies, to operate there fairly independently. So if the U.S. wants to put more soldiers there, I think they probably could. So that argument that they need it for the military doesn't really hold water.
Moreover, or in addition, the island has vast reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, and natural gas. And as Arctic ice melts due to global warming, these resources are becoming increasingly accessible. So yeah, there you have it. There's probably a reason why the U.S. wants to possess Greenland. It has these vast reserves of rare earth minerals. A mineral is just basically something that comes out of the ground. It could be coal, it could be magnesium or whatever. These are rare earth minerals, which of course are used in various electronic products and maybe medical instruments and things like that. So, of course, you might expect that the Americans would probably be interested in possessing Greenland. It would be a great place to own or possess if you wanted those rare earths.
There you go. And, of course, yes, as things warm up and the ice starts to thaw, other opportunities like oil and natural gas, both on the land and in the waters around Greenland, those will also become more attractive for mining companies and oil companies. As it says, as Arctic ice melts due to global warming, these resources are becoming increasingly increasingly accessible. True also for the Canadian North and the Russian North, the Russian Arctic regions. If things become accessible, it's easy to get to them. It's easy to reach them. It's easy to get access to them. So public transportation makes more and more of the city accessible for people who don't have cars or for people who have problems moving around. Wheelchairs and elevators and things like that make the city accessible. They can go places they couldn't go before. So yes, it will definitely in the future be more possible for miners and whatnot to go to these places because the ice will be disappearing, which is bad news for the planet, but good news for miners and oil companies.
And people who want to make tons of money. And our beloved Chinese teacher is an avid world traveler. Maybe someday she'll go to Greenland, but before then, she's going to talk to us now.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到，格陵兰大部分的土地位于北极圈内，终年被冰雪覆盖，其余的地区则是冻原。文中用到 most of its land... while the rest... 去表达大部分的土地怎么样，而其余地区怎么样。while 在这边是当连接词，那我们就来整理它当连接词的不同意思。第一个是课文用法，是表达而、然而，用来连接两个对比或者是不同的陈述，意思相当于 whereas。举例来说， While Ryan likes to travel with his friends, his brother prefers to travel alone.Ryan 喜欢跟朋友一起旅行，而他哥哥喜欢独自旅行。补充一下，我们在第二天课文也会看到 while 一样是这个用法。他提到说 some visitors 怎么样怎么样 while others 怎么样怎么样，就是表达有些游客怎么样，而有些人则怎么样怎么样。好，那么第二个补充的是 while 可以表达虽然尽管，意思跟 though although 一样，用来引导让步副词子句。例如While the car is old, it's still in good condition. 尽管这辆车子旧了，但它的车况还是很好。第三个是可以用来表达 during the time that， 也就是在什么期间与什么同时。While 是用来引导时间副词子句。例如 It started to rain while we were waiting for the bus. 在我们等公车的时候开始下雨了。那补充一下，当连接的两个子句主词一样时，我们可以省略掉副词子句的主词，也就是省略掉 while 后方的那个主词，然后再把动词改分词。动词为主动就用现在分词 VING， 被动就保留过去分词 PP， 所以就会看到 while 加上分词 VING 或 PP 的结构。例如 Tim dropped his phone while getting out of the taxi. Tim 下计程车的时候手机掉了。好，另外在课文句子里面 Tundra 动员它的后面用到了 a flat treeless landscape where little survives 来描述它是一片平坦无树而且鲜少有生命存活的土地。那文中用到名词 landscape， 它可以指地貌或者是陆地上的风景。这个单字其实很好理解哦，我们知道 land 是指陆地，那么 SCAPE 这个字尾常常用在组合字里，用来表示风景，所以合在一起 landscape 就是指陆上风景、自然景色。其他还有像是 cityscape 就是城市景观、都市风景， cloudscape 云景， seascape 海景， streetscape 街景，还有 townscape城镇景观等等。好，那么以上就是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Thrust. Sarah was thrust into the role of team leader when her boss quit with no notice. Remark. Jeremy's rude remark during the discussion surprised the teacher and his classmates. Spotlight. Reports about the politician's secret business deals have been in the spotlight for weeks. Landscape. As a result of the earthquake, the landscape of the valley was changed dramatically. Sovereignty. National sovereignty allows a nation's government to make its own laws and policies. Perspective. Professor Foley's book offers a unique perspective on the effects of technology on society. Mineral. Salt is a natural mineral that has been mined and traded for centuries. Accessible. As renewable energy technology improves, clean power is becoming more accessible to developing countries.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.